Is Lucy Letby a monster? Or is she the victim of a monstrous miscarriage of justice? Is she a serial killer or the scapegoat for a hospital unit full of killer bacteria? Was a unit run by doctors who have questions of their own to answer? And was she framed by a horribly flawed prosecution case?
This is Lucy Letby, Was She Wronged? On It's Criminal.
Hello, welcome to Lucy Letby, Was She Wronged? Episode 3, What Happens Next? And so today, with my wonderful co-host Ruth Barnes, we're going to go through the various legal hurdles that Lucy Letby has got to go through if she's ever going to prove her innocence. And by the way, that's a bloody big if.
Let's start with the Thirlwall Inquiry. So something by the middle of this year probably will be published. It's meant to be April, but surely that's too soon.
So what this is that after the convictions, Lucy Letby is a monster. There's a lot of pressure on the politicians to do something. And what they classically do is they have a public inquiry. And the person appointed was Lady Justice Thirlwall, a very distinguished judge. But the whole damn thing, Ruth, is predicated on Lucy Letby being guilty. And I know what it was like because, as you know, on the day that she was convicted, I tweeted, sometimes the law gets it wrong. But the law doesn't like thinking too much about that. And so this entire process has been broken back because everything is predicated on her guilt. But what happened is for the open hearings and this evidence which the public inquiry came out with again and again and again, you looked into the nitty-gritty, the detail of this neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital, and the evidence was damning that this was a badly run hospital.
What is the central question that the Thirlwall Inquiry is trying to answer?
Is how can we prevent a serial killer from doing this again?
Right.
And the problem is that's presuming she's guilty.
Exactly.
And what about the other question is, how can we prevent a badly run hospital leading to far too many baby deaths?
Right. Which seems that seems the sensible one to answer.
Or is it the best question? What happened here? Open question. And had that been the terms of the inquiry, it would be okay. Even so, there's a ton of evidence that's come in the wash that's very powerful, points to her innocence, not guilt.
Yeah.
Points to the question, like, was there a crime? Well, perhaps there was a crime, but it's corporate manslaughter, not murder. Now, by the way, the inquiry was due to report late last year, and now it's April.
Yeah.
And the way these things work, people say they're going to be criticised, so you get your fancy lawyers and you say, I don't like this, I'm going to challenge it. That can take time, so that the report can keep on going back. But there's something else to bear in mind with all of this, which is there are people, if, for example, the consultants who pointed the finger at Lucy Letby, and it is the case that they were criticised by their own professional body, the Royal College of Paediatricians, because they, for example, it's good practice to do 2 ward rounds a day, and they were doing 2 ward rounds a week. Simple thing, but that was there.
Crucial thing.
If then we're not looking at murder, but we're looking at, say, corporate manslaughter, it's in people's interests to push it back. Also true of the police. If the police have made an appalling cock-up, it's a hypothetical, okay? If they've cocked up, then the longer this process, the whole process lasts, the better for them.
What happens to the police if it is an appalling cock-up? What happens next?
Hillsborough, in my experience, is, the Hillsborough was open and shut. David Dukenfield cocked up massively. At the critical moment, his brain froze. By the way, he hadn't done that gig before, and he shouldn't have been doing it. He wasn't the right kind of person. And because he was afraid of making a decision, so he did nothing. And eventually, passage of time, He wasn't prosecuted. So my experience of this is that nothing will happen to the police apart from the fact that they will be shamed. And by the way, if you haven't watched it, watch the Netflix documentary, or actually watch any of the documentaries and have a look at Paul Hughes and tell me if you think that man has an open mind, then I will disagree with you.
That goes for a lot of journalists as well who've covered the case without an open mind, who I think of even conversations that I've had in my time talking about our podcast. Was there ever a crime where people have emphatically said to me, it's ridiculous, she's totally guilty, she's a serial killer, she's a monster. And I just think,
okay, but what I would say, and where is your evidence?
That's right.
Where is your evidence that she harmed a single baby?
Right.
Now, what we're now talking about is evidence of really complicated medical stuff. But the fundamental assumption is we can rule out the fact that these kids were seriously sick, and many of them, I'm afraid to say, it's more likely than not that they will die because they're born so premature. And then you add the fact that this is a hospital unit with bad pipes and raw sewage gets into it. And raw sewage can kill. So it's got killer bacteria in it, and that can kill. The Thirlwall Inquiry ignores all of that. So fundamentally, it is a fantastic waste of public money. 10 million quid wasted because the person in charge has assumed something, has a closed mind about Lucy Letby's guilt, and the proper question is, what happened here?
Inquests, what's going on there? How's that going to pan out?
So this is weird too. So what happened was, of the 7 murders, not one, there was a proper inquest, and not once did the doctors who later accused Lucy Letby of murder said, by the way, I think this is suspicious, I want an inquest.
Right.
So if I'm the coroner, I would be pissed off because it's my job to investigate this kind of stuff. And again, if I'm the coroner, you go in with an open mind. Because coroners do this for a living. By the way, a year before Lucy Letby is in trouble, the Cheshire coroner has an investigation into the death of a baby, and he's very critical of one of the doctors, Dr. B, who won anonymity, so we don't know who she is and we can't identify her.
Right.
But Dr. B is criticised because of her failure to look after a baby. We gave her a right of reply. This is in our previous podcast, Lucy Letby, was there ever a crime? And the reply was because of the Thirlwall Inquiry. We can't comment. But nevertheless, that's a big issue. So that the coroner wasn't asked at the right time. Now, legally, there has to be an inquest. And again, of course, murder is, that's the legal finding. But a coroner's court is slightly different, and they do go in with an open mind. So it's interesting. Now, what's happened now is that there was one inquest to one of the babies. So there's 6 inquests to start. They've started, and then there's a kind of one open day, and then we'll stop hearings for a time, and we don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But again, what's significant is that Mark MacDonald, the new and extremely good defence barrister, who trained he was a paramedic, so he understands medicine because he worked as a nurse or a paramedic for about more than a decade.
Mark MacDonald was actually an operating theatre assistant.
So he knows his medicine, he knows the NHS inside out, and then he trained to become a lawyer. He's almost the perfect defence lawyer for this.
You can see why he was so attracted to the
and he gets it.
Yeah.
He gets it. He understands it. So he has gone to the coroner and said, I want to be able to ask questions on behalf of Lucy Letby. And the coroner said, fine. Now that means when they all say murder, Mark will put up his hand and say, can we talk about the shit in the unit, please? Can we talk about the raw sewage? And can we get an expert, like a professor of public health? What does a killer bacteria do to a premature baby?
Yeah.
And by the way, already we know that there is one of the children had indications of this particular form of killer bacteria, which is the big thing in the hospital in Glasgow, where the authorities are looking at corporate manslaughter. The same killer bacteria in one hospital, the Countess of Chester, it's because there's a serial murder and we're not interested in the killer bacteria, but in Scotland they are, and that's wrong.
Yeah.
That is what we like in investigative journalism, that's an anomaly.
Yeah, right.
And that doesn't make sense.
No.
So if a killer bacteria can kill kids in Scotland, it can kill kids in Cheshire. Full stop. Have an open mind.
A lot of our rights of reply have been, we won't say anything because of the Thirlwall Inquiry. Once that's published, once that finding has been published, what happens then? Do you think we'll actually get some replies?
Well, you and I, Ruth, will get sued. And then I will say, see you in court.
Right.
And I will call Gísli, possibly the most eminently qualified neonatologist in the world, and he will set out his reasons why he believes there are no murders, and that means that this life of this poor English woman has been ruined for no good reason.
It's interesting, you mentioned obviously Gísli and the 14 incredible neonatologists who made up that panel, but today the newspaper that we featured in episode 1 with your orange hat over the name of it has broken the news.
Rhymes with bum.
Rhymes with bum. Yes, has broken the news about Professor, and excuse my pronunciation, Gísli Guðjónsson, who is the world expert on the forensic psychology of confessions. And this is, again, about the notes that we talked about so much in episode 2. He's actually quit his job at the National Crime Agency to give evidence that the scrawled notes by Lucy Letby are emphatically not admissions of guilt. And he's had to quit his job because of the conflict of interest. And he has done that so that he can work with Mark MacDonald.
So to those people out there saying, what about the confession?
Right.
Then they have to get round the problem. The lead expert in this country at the National Crime Agency, which is our FBI, has left our FBI so he can say, you're talking rubbish.
Yeah.
So after the Thirlwall Inquiry, the doctors who have not been able, and the police and the CPS, who have not been able to answer our questions, and maybe that's been frustrating for them, will now be able to do so. But the problem also is it's good for us to be able to say, well, we asked this question, and what answer did we get? So, for example, the number one question I'd like to ask Ravi Jairam, the lead singer of his band The Deluded, but also a doctor in the unit who accused Lucy Letby, he told the jury that Lucy Letby did not bring it to attention that one of these babies, who went on to die, I believe, was suffering. Something was wrong. But actually, he sent an email on the day or the day after saying that Lucy Letby did bring his attention to the baby who was in trouble.
Yeah.
So which is true?
Which is true, exactly.
Dr. Jairam, what is true? Also, Dr. Jairam, why weren't you in the Netflix documentary?
That's very interesting.
Because this is your opportunity to shine.
That's right.
You were on the X Factor.
Well.
You're on the One Show.
Yeah.
Why weren't you on Netflix? Exactly. What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Didn't used to. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Gibbs, when you say you've got this tiny, tiny, tiny bit of doubt, well, that's enough, mate.
Yeah.
Because and I've been a juror, and the thing is, you can't convict if you've got doubt.
Yeah.
Reasonable doubt. It's not ridiculous, but it sounds like he's got doubt.
What happens then next in terms of the CCRC and it going to the Court of Appeal? And
Ruth, the honest answer to the question is I don't fucking know, but I'm a journalist, so I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah.
So first of all, you've got the Thirlwall Inquiry, and I don't think anything moves until that happens. That report is a waste of public money. 10 million quid down the spout. It's gibberish. I can tell you now, gibberish, of no use to anyone, because the judge went in with a closed mind.
Yeah.
The Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is currently run by Vera Bird, the previous boss got into trouble because they waited something like 20 years before pushing along with the case, and the poor guy was innocent, and he spent pretty much his entire life in prison rotting for something he did not do. So the CCRC is in trouble, and if it was me, I'd want to show that I'm in good order. And I know Vera Baird a little bit. Obviously, she wouldn't talk to me about something like this, but she used to be a Labour MP, and I think she was the Solicitor General, or she was one of the government's law officers back in Tony Blair's government. So I think that she will be very sympathetic to Lucy Letby. From what I know of her from before, she's obviously a proper and good person, and a good person to run the Criminal Cases Review Commission.
Right.
So if I'm them, I'd want to fast track it. At the same time, they want to get it right, and this is a horribly complicated story. There are 7 murders, 8 attempted murders. There is a lot of people there to consider, and there's a lot of process, and they need to be on it. At the same time, one of the people sat next to Gísli and David Davis was the former head of the Royal College of Paediatricians. So the really smart doctors are on Lucy's side. And again, we mentioned this in the last episode, but the Cheshire Police wanted to prosecute Lucy for more murders, and the CPS has said no. And I think the reason for that, my guess, remember I'm a journalist and I'm not Almighty God, you may find that difficult. Anyway, but my guess is that they couldn't find a new Dewi Evans who can look at this. I would say, oh, that's murder because you've got a failing NHS, because this is very, very difficult, because these babies are premature. The other explanation is that actually these babies die in hospital not because they're being murdered, it's because they are likely to die. And in particular, they're going to die if the hospital isn't working properly and it's unhealthy, if it's got killer bacteria swirling around. You bet.
One of the frustrations with the trial was the kind of the lack of expert defence.
Yeah, the defence didn't show up.
Right.
They're lawyers, and one should always be worried about lawyers, but the only the only witness for Lucy Letby, apart from Lucy herself, who, to be fair, denied guilt, but was the plumber at the hospital,
right,
talking about every now and then there was shit in the pipe. The shit in the pipes got into the sink. Like, there's one specific episode, but he was called to the unit, which was also the maternity suite, on a weekly basis. And when it rained heavily, there would be floods, and that would cause trouble too. So you've got the Criminal Cases Review Commission, and their job is to look at something and say, we think this needs to go to the Court of Appeal. I think they're going to do that sometime quite soon, because they want to show that they're fit for purpose, they're good. Then it goes to the Court of Appeal. And now that's a big thing, because there's a judge. And by the way, there are criticisms to be made of Mr. Justice Goss, who's just retired. The primary criticism is that while the trial was going place, a senior judge from the family court said there is a problem with Dewi Evans, that he's wacky, he's cranky. By the way, that's not. I'm not paraphrasing. I'm making something up. But it was. In judges, and I don't speak good judges, said this guy is not a reliable witness.
He'll basically say what you want him to say, essentially.
And you should worry about Dewi Evans as a good expert witness, because he's too one-sided. He doesn't look at the thing in the round. He doesn't have an open mind, in my language. And Justice told the jury about it, and said, so be aware, but let the case continued. And by the way, that was a perfectly good spot for the entire case to stop and to be kicked out, because there was a question mark, not about the accused, but the accuser. And and there are other expert witnesses, but it's Dewi Evans who is the star of the prosecution case. And I've met him, and he's a very strange man. With reference to the tragedy of Robbie Powell, when he said, listen, I didn't understand that there had been essentially a terrible mistake in the hospital of which he was, I believe, the senior paediatrician, or one of 3. This is his hospital in Swansea. He didn't know about it until he read a newspaper article in The Guardian 3 or 4 years later. And Robbie Powell's father, Will Powell finds this hard to believe.
Yeah.
And so do I.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, in my experience in your workplace, you know everything about it. So then the Court of Appeal, they have two options: retrial or she's free.
Okay. And what leads to what? What leads to she's free? What leads to a retrial?
So they've got two options.
Yeah.
They can order a retrial. And by the way, then Cheshire Police, who of course have got skin in the game, who have got their own reputation to defend, they could spend 2 years finding or not finding experts who will do the same job as Dewi Evans did, bearing in mind that Dewi Evans has said, although if he's called to testify, he will testify, and of course his evidence will be critical to the defence, but he will not initiate or be at the centre of a new prosecution, as I understand it. So they'll need somebody.
They need other people.
They'll need somebody else, and they may not. But it may take them a long time to find them. But they don't. That's not a problem. If you're them, you can make that argument. Maybe that's unfair. And here's the right of reply, but they can't reply because of the Thirlwall Inquiry. So that's one of the difficulties we've got to contend with. But that all remains the case. The Court of Appeal might say she's free, in which case Lucy Letby will go from standing in the dock to walking out, and then she's free.
And what will happen to her? What kind of life will she have, do you think?
Well, for the rest of her days, there will be people who think that she's guilty.
Yeah, but she'd probably have to leave the country, I imagine.
But it would be good to go through the whole thing and to her to explain, for example, the confession notes. That was therapy. I was just going through a kind of exercise I thought that would help me get better.
Yeah.
On running with the unit and, the shit, the killer bacteria.
Yeah.
The insulin, one of the difficulties with the defence is that she conceded that somebody was injecting babies with insulin. And basically, this is based on bad science, which everybody assumed was correct. The reality is we don't know enough about the blood chemistry of premature babies to be able to say with confidence what level of insulin you would expect. And therefore, the deduction that this must have been put in malevolently, that somebody poisoned the kid, these babies, is a false assumption based on bad science. Lucy assumed that the bad science was good science, and she was wrong.
Yeah. One possibility, she walks free. The other possibility is a retrial. What would that retrial look like? How long would it take? Are we going to see Mark MacDonald bringing in all these expert witnesses finally?
Oh yes.
To have their say. Shuley will be on the stand. Professor Guðjónsson will be on the stand.
Our expert on confession notes was saying, well, and by the way, by signalling that he's, by walking out of the National Crime Agency and saying, I'm going to work for the defence, that's the end of that piece of evidence.
Yeah.
I don't think the CPS and Cheshire Police will be able to find experts who can say what Dewi Evans said first time round. So I think if it's a retrial, it will be a waste of time, and eventually, and this means more prison time for Lucy Letby, eventually they'll give up. And I'm 67, but I want to live long enough to be able to meet Lucy Letby and to actually to give her a hug and to say, when you told your mum when you were arrested, I didn't do it, you were right. And all of the people who've accused you of being a murderer, they need to look at themselves and they need to say properly, we are sorry. You've been watching Lucy Letby, Was She Wronged? Episode 3. What happens next? Now, this is the last of our 3 episodes. Thanks very much for watching. Keep on commenting. When we've got a moment, we'll reply to as many of the comments as we can. And if something happens that's big in this territory, we're going to come back.
We'll be here.
Yeah. And thanks for watching. And remember, it's always better to have an open mind.
We've been in touch with Cheshire Police, the Crown Prosecution Service and the Countess of Chester Hospital, and they've told us they can't comment because of the ongoing Thirlwall Inquiry into the Lucy Letby case. Previously, we've been in touch with the doctors who accused Lucy Letby, and they too have said they aren't in a position to comment because of the Thirlwall Inquiry.